and goes to the industry and say that we can initiate this research from the very beginning that these things are setting up, you can have a lot of leverage over these companies in years to come as to how should research be conducted within the company and why is research important for them. So to take you to the background, how did we get involved in McDonald's? My position within Lancaster is funded by the industry. So what happens is that a consortium of 14, 15 top industries, they do the like of IBM, Shell, Vodafone, McDonald's, they combine together because they need academic, not just consultancy. If they want to buy any consultancy services from anywhere, they can buy it. They have enough resources to do that. But there's a difference between when consultancies provide you advice as compared to when it comes from academic institutes like us, you guys that because there is very little conflict of interest. And we are supposed to be more methodology-led rather than just result-led. So we will have to follow a very sound methodology. So we are more evidence-based. We will be always more skeptical regarding whether a particular intervention is going to work or not. And we will only be suggesting an advice or suggesting an intervention if we are convinced through our methodology that this intervention is going to work for the company. And this is how we started. As I told you, my position was funded by these companies. And McDonald's came to us. They said that we want to know what is the impact of our crew attitude. So there are two levels of employees, and that will be almost true for all retail businesses. Broadly speaking, two levels of employees. One is what we call crew, who are surveyed. So if you walk into any McDonald's or if you walk into any of these easy day types of stores, you'll find that there are a lot of shop floor level employees working and serving you. And on top of that, there will be sort of what you can call middle level manager, and then we want business manager. It's called a business manager, maybe it's called a manager, or I don't know what nomenclature we use here in these stores. But in McDonald's, it's called a business manager. So you can say three levels of hierarchies exist. The shop floor level workers, what we call the crew. Then you have middle level managers and the business manager. But overall, you can divide it in just two. One is crew and the other are managers who just manage that stuff. Initially, they were interested in only one thing, and they were interested in what impact does crew attitude have on the performance of the store. So principally what it means is, what do if employees or the crew of a store think positively about the organization, does that have an impact on how the store performs? And the hypothesis would have been, yes, it should. But there was no clear-cut answer to that. They would do employee surveys, what they call the viewpoint surveys, every year. But only thing they were doing was tracking it from one year to the other, so that in one particular year, if I said that I'm very satisfied with my job, in the next year, has that satisfaction level increased or decreased? Is all they were measuring. When I came into the picture and when they requested me to do that, I suggested that we use a more robust technique. Any of you doing quantitative research in this? Yeah, so we use a technique, so you might be familiar with that, we use a technique called factor analysis. And I have been using factor analysis to a large extent. Many of these employees, as I'm both by training, I started as a quantitative psychologist, and that was my basic method of research when I did my PhD. But I realized very soon that quantitative method is only going to tell you so much. So nowadays, probably the best method to use and prescribe is what is called a hybrid method. In a hybrid method, we almost start with a quantitative data analysis, and in a second phase, a quantitative data analysis gives you a bird's eye view. It almost tells you that problem seems to be in this spot in your organization. It's never going to tell you what exactly the problem is, what the magnitude of the problem is, and it's not going to give you a very granular picture of the problem. So to understand the granular picture of the problem, you actually have to do what we call a qualitative study, or what I conduct is a focus group interviews. So once you have analyzed the hotspots in an organization, you actually go into that organization, talk to the people, ask them the relevant questions which you have identified through your quantitative analysis, and then you understand what the problem was. And then you build up your advice based on this method. And we had a very you move in a very systematic manner. And the questions that I asked McDonald's was that what do we want to answer from the research? And the basic focus of I sitting here and presenting these findings is how is field research done, which is acceptable by the industry. There are two audiences to any research. One is that your target is only publications, that you publish these findings. One is that your target is the industry. And the industry accepts and makes intervention based upon what your findings are. The target audience out here are both. But my first target, because it's a sort of an applied funded research, is whatsoever money McDonald's has spent on me, I'm going to advise them, and I have advised them as to what do they need to do to improve the stores which are not performing to an optimal level. And my research sort of answers those questions. But if I have to publish a paper out of it, many of these things will be needed to be changed and have to be presented and written in a very different manner as compared to the way I'm presenting. These are almost the findings. I presented this finding to the board just on the Friday before I was to come here. So I think it was the 16th. I came here I started on the 19th of May to come here. But I presented my findings to them. So this is actually the presentation which I presented to their board. So in some way, you are the only other audience to which I am presenting. And I would hope that they will remain confidential because they are supposed to be that way. So what we started with was that my way of thinking is that if you are hypothesizing that who is having an impact on a store performance, and we established that through my previous research with them. So I've been researching with them in the past 4 years, and we established that what crew think about you as a company, what crew think about their own work, the sort of work which they are doing, what crew think about their store leadership has a big impact on an overall store performance. We found that through a longitudinal research, we could really trace how a change in attitude of a group was having an impact on the change in the performance of the store. We had to establish that. We wanted to extend that research, and we said, because we had found out through our research on the crew attitude, that what the crew thought about their managers was having an important impact on their own feelings and attitudes. So we thought that probably it is a nice idea that rather than just hearing about the crew's attitude, we should also measure the manager's attitude. Just to give you a parallel, it's almost like you asking your students what they think about your institute overall and the impact that it is having on the performance of the institute. Yeah, that's fine. But your students' attitude is influenced by probably what you think to a large extent about your institute where you're working. So if all of you go to your classes and if you're always cribbing, this is a trashy institute, it does nothing. We should not be, probably I'm going to leave this institute. I'm not going to work here for long. What impact do you think it's going to have on the students? The students are going to start thinking that, maybe this is finally, after all, not that good an institute. But if you go to the classroom and say, this is a fabulous institute, it's really doing a hard work, our chairman is, taking a lot of interest, if we progress further, there's a lot of new things coming up. So if you create a sort of positive vibe within your classes by your own commitment, what happens is, it has what we call a contagion effect. The students start feeling excited about it. And you have a sort of a positive feeling. If the students get excited, they work harder, possibly they are going to work better in their academics, probably get placed better, work better in industry, and it almost becomes a full cycle. The same is happening in a showcase place.
But here, how are you going to then capture this particular aspect?
Because
the questionnaire, your respondents are going to be teachers as well as
the students.
Yes,
both. Yeah. the response, and I'll show you in a short while, that we have two different questionnaires, and I'll show you both, and I conducted a factor analysis on both. So we have a set of questionnaires for managers, and we have a set of questionnaires for the crew. So if you have to conduct a similar research, the example, a sort of a parallel which I gave with the work that you are doing, would be that you conduct a survey, a sort of attitude survey, which can be designed, which captures the attitude of the students, and then you have a survey which captures the attitude of the faculty. And then you try to find a relationship that how does our faculty's attitude towards the institute, is that in some way related to what students think about it? And that was my logic of trying to tell McDonald's, if you really want to understand what is having an impact on crew's attitude, you might well try to first capture what managers think about their own work. So the first question which we wanted to do, the first thing which we did, there's more of a statistical thing that I conducted a factor analysis on the manager's viewpoint or the manager's survey. The first thing which we wanted to really answer was, what impact does manager viewpoint have on crew viewpoints? So parallel in your case would be, what impact does a faculty viewpoint or a faculty attitude have on students' viewpoints? The second thing which we wanted to answer was, what collective impact does a manager and a crew viewpoint have on the performance of a store? And in your case, it is a more ticklish thing to answer, that if I ask you what collective impact does a faculty and a student viewpoint have on the performance of the institute? The difficult thing in your case is, how do you measure the performance of your institute? Performance measurement in a business is somewhat easier because they are very metrics driven. There are so many matrices that you can use, but it's not to say that performance of the institutes cannot be measured. You can always decide that these are our performance matrices on which the institute should be measured. These are our espoused goals, these are our immediate goals, and you can choose in a particular year what performance targets do you think you should really be targeting. I'm just taking into, and this is the actual survey which I'm talking about. The manager's viewpoint factors, there are 61 scored questions, and this is more of a statistics, so I'm not going to bore you too much, those who are not too much statistically minded. But we use a technique called factor analysis. What factor analysis does is, rather than dealing with a huge number of items, 61 items, you cannot really do anything with those 61 items. You cannot have 61 interventions. So to make the picture more crisp, understandable, we reduce the data. And this reduction technique is called factor analysis. From these 61 scored questions, we arrive at just 7 factors.
These are critical factors.
Yeah, these are critical factors which are having the maximum impact on the difference which is being shown from one score to the other, as you may see it. These 7 factors, which is
61 were the factors or they were variables?
No, 61 were the statements. So there are 61 statements. So these become 7 factors. You can call them factors, you can call them variables, because ultimately they will be used as independent variables to have an impact. In the first case,
factors, there could be multiple variables also. One factor may
how will there be multiple variables in a given factor? Factor analysis principally means, if you are using an orthogonal rotation, then they have to be orthogonal. So they will have to be just one factor. So if you are not using orthogonal rotation, if you are using more of a diagonal rotation, so there might be a huge correlation between various factors, but there will still be one factor. So this is going to remain a single factor. Like positive work and organizational attitude, I'll give you an example of why this is being called.
But again, positive work, organizational attitude could again be further. There are so many aspects that constitute this plan, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's in one way. I'll just show you what it means.
Because this is more of a generalized statement, you can say.
It's the way the factor analysis labeling is done is we do not put in labels first. We get the factors first. So when you do factor analysis, these are the factor weights which come up. So things like overall, I would recommend working at McDonald's to a friend. I feel that I can have a rewarding career at McDonald's. Overall, I'm satisfied with my job. I'm proud to work at McDonald's. On the whole, I look forward to coming to work. So what factor analysis does is actually shows that there is a very high level of correlation, intercorrelation between these factors, and they are different. Collectively, these 5 statements are different from other statements. So there were 61 statements overall. And what factor analysis is actually doing is grouping them together and saying that this is forming a factor, and that's why I was talking about, orthogonal rotation. You don't have a flip chart, otherwise that's all right. I don't want to go on too much into statistics. The crux is that this is what we first get the statements out here, and in these statements we give them a label.